What's up, everybody? Welcome to FoundFlix. On this Ending Explained, we'll be looking at the sequel to Happy Death Day to You, where our returning lead Tree finds herself reliving the same day all over once again, but this time under completely different circumstances that are much more science fiction than horror in origin. This is probably the most surprising shift from the first film to the sequel. Happy Death Day was the melding of a mysterious slasher and the reliving the same day concept of Groundhog Day, while the sequel goes into a much more sci-fi comedy direction, the obvious origin here being Back to the Future 2, which gets name-checked just as Groundhog Day was in the first film, as well as even using some of those same magical tinkling sounds at key moments straight out of those beloved sci-fi classics. You know what I'm talking about. So it's not like this was an accident or something like that. The change does make for a drastically different experience compared to the first, which could make this story direction divisive for those looking for more horror. But I also love sci-fi comedies, so I have no issues with this change-up, and it does the genre quite well, making for an overall entertaining experience that rivals the first. I think another potentially divisive choice is the Babyface Killer essentially being on the back burner for most of the movie, so there's not really a strong villain or threat, which was a big reason the first one worked so well. So without that, it's just kind of strange, as there isn't much suspense or tension to speak of. The closest thing we get to a villain this time is an uptight dean at the college who has it out for Ryan and his group, probably another throwback to a staple of 80s comedies. I think if they found a way to keep the killer in the picture in a more substantial way, or at least another new kind of threat out there, this would have helped to balance things out a bit more. The real issue is it struggles to balance so many different genres at once, and moves at such a quick speed into so many different directions that some of it all feels maybe a little underdeveloped. I'm only being picky here because these little details are exactly what it's my job to pay attention to, so bear that in mind. But in movies like this, there are rules established as to how the science fiction works in the universe, such as Back to the Future, which has different time travel rules than, say, the Terminator movies. Each have their own specific rules, not that they have to be scientifically accurate or anything like that. The problem in this regard with Happy Death Day to You is every sci-fi kind of out there moment revealed, it only brings a million more questions as to how and why things work the way they do. But this is all really inconsequential to my enjoyment of the movie, and it still is a lot of fun. And just as in the first film, Jessica Rothe really makes these movies what they are, and shows even more impressive range here in a few surprisingly emotional moments. Maybe the point is that this stuff isn't of importance to the overall story, but considering how much this actually forms the basis of the entire story, it left far too many things unexplained and unexplored. But as usual, I will do my best to put together everything that is there to explain everything going on with the many unanswered questions in the movie. So let's check out Happy Death Day to You, breaking down the story, its many sci-fi fueled twists and turns, as well as the final scene that sets us up for a potential part 3 in the series. First, a quick refresher on where our story is so far, as this ends up being extremely important, with the sequel picking up a mere one day after Tree's time loop. As we saw then, Tree relived Monday the 18th, her birthday over and over, each day ending with her being murdered by a killer wearing a baby face mask, the mascot of her college. As weird as that is, Tree had been kind of spiraling into misery and bitchiness due to her mom's death, and thusly has many potential enemies that could want her dead, and hopes that stopping the killer could stop the loop as well. So she uses the time loops and her many deaths to uncover the killer's identity and one by one rule out the suspects, discovering in the end to be her roommate and supposed friend Lori behind the mask. The motivation being Tree has been having an affair with their dreamy British professor Gregory. Lori liked him too, and so was jealous of Tree. Thusly, she staged a way to kill Tree without getting caught, using the transfer of a patient to the hospital, a serial killer called Toombs, to her advantage, intending to kill Tree herself and plant the blame on the obvious suspect of Toombs. Once Tree figures her out, after eating a special birthday cupcake Lori made for her, which turned out to be poison, she confronts Lori and stuffs the cupcake down her throat and kicks her ass out the window. Killing her does indeed fix the time loop, and she is able to wake up the next morning on Tuesday the 19th in her now boyfriend Carter's dorm room, which is immediately where we pick up in the sequel. While Tree was able to break free of her cycle, it appears that the loop has now somehow attached itself to Carter's roommate Ryan, who soon finds himself to be reliving Tuesday the 19th over and over, and to make matters worse is the target of a new Babyface Killer, each of Ryan's deaths resetting the day just as with Tree before. But who is behind the mask this time? That's where things start to get a little more into deeper sci-fi territory. Explaining his confusing situation to Tree, she is of course quite familiar with exactly what he's going through, and now that he has some more understanding of the time loop situation, Ryan thinks he might know the cause of this break in the time-space continuum, revealing that he and his science pals Dre and Samar have created one of those impossible science fiction devices, the Sisyphus Quantum Cooling Reactor, or SISI for short. Turns out it was the random firing of this quantum reactor, according to Ryan, as though it fired on its own a few days earlier, that created the time loop. And something like this requiring a ton of power to operate is also behind the many blackouts that plague the campus during the first film, though it firing was actually a malfunction, and they have yet to find the correct algorithm to properly operate the reactor, let alone to close the loop for good. But Tree believes she's got this whole thing under control, knowing exactly how she solved her own loop, and takes over the situation and the movie to track down Ryan's killer, setting up a trap to catch him. And his identity is a surprising one: Ryan himself. What? Him claiming that he's actually the same Ryan, but from an alternate universe, who came here specifically to stop our Ryan from using Sissy, as Ryan too is also in his own independent time loop. I'm not sure why he would need to bother with the baby mask and all that stuff, but I do appreciate the effort anyway. They decide to fire up Sissy regardless, not considering the potential unknown effects. The still faulty algorithm overloads the reactor, exploding out in a blue wave of light, flinging everyone in the room into the air. After this, Tree wakes up finding herself at a hauntingly familiar place, in Carter's bed at his dorm room, but back on September 18th. Oh no, not again! But instead of it being the exact same day, the exact same way, the reactor sent her into an alternate parallel universe of our own. The idea established being that there are an infinite amount of these parallel universes, all operating independently at the same time. Yep, that's right, we've got a multiverse situation on our hands. And there is a second Tree in this alternate universe, but according to Ryan, when our Tree came over, Tree 2 was also affected, stuck into a kind of holding zone in between dimensions. As for why she and not the others were carried over, I'm not sure exactly. It would have actually made a lot more sense if all of those in the blast radius came along with Tree, but guess not, for reasons, science reasons. So while for the most part appearing the same, including every beat from Tree's day that she has more than memorized, now the mere sight of which drives her absolutely batty, there are some significant shakeups, including her boyfriend Carter now dating her frenemy Danielle to her chagrin. It's weird because Carter and Tree have technically only been dating for 2 days at this point, but I know with the time loops and all, it's a bit different, I suppose. But even more surprising is that in this universe, Tree's mother is alive. In the first film, she dealt a lot with the loss of her mother, a key point to her journey from a hated sorority girl with countless enemies to a better person in the end. So even if a little annoying that Carter is dating Danielle, this universe isn't looking so bad to Tree, and actually decides to stay here permanently and figure out how to close the loop for good. The problem being she was the only one transported to the other universe, so her more familiar with how the Sissy Works cohorts will reset each day, and won't remember their various attempts to get the correct algorithm to permanently close the loop. This also makes something else clear, yet still very odd, that Ryan 2 from the beginning has to actually be from a third alternate universe, because the Ryan even in this one is just as in the dark about how the reactor works. In Ryan 2's universe, they must know at least how to control the reactor enough to get to our original universe as we see, but this seemingly huge aspect of things doesn't get much development and feels like a pretty huge loose thread in the story so far. If you're wondering where the Babyface Killer fits into all this, well, there is another killer on the loose in this world too, with the same climactic events going down at the hospital that night as in the first film. But their target this time isn't Tree. In this universe, she didn't have an affair with her professor, which was the admittedly silly motivation for Laurie's murderous intentions against her roommate. In this universe, Laurie is quite alive, and this time she's the one having an affair with the British professor Gregory. So with Tree no longer the target, really the killer is almost completely pushed to the background this time, as Tree instead opts to kill herself in various hilarious ways to reset the day, and each time working to remember which trials they've conducted, along the way becoming a quite adept scientist in her own right, or at least very good at remembering extremely complex formulas. Throughout this process, she also gets to rekindle a relationship with her alive mother, something Tree never dreamed of happening again, being able to, in a sense, replace her alternate self and continue having a relationship with her mom. Unfortunately, it's not that simple, it turns out. At one point, scanning through her phone are photos and videos of Tree and her mom together, but in the photos, it's of course Tree 2, not our Tree never having actually experienced them, though the idea alone of being with her mother in any form is enough for Tree to keep trying to find the formula. But as we remember, each death has lingering physical effects on Tree's body, and the number of deaths and resets are taking their toll, Tree feeling she doesn't have too many chances left. Luckily, on the next loop, they come to the final and correct formula to operate the Sissy, and Tree seems content to stay in this alternate world forever. That is until the reality of the situation rears its head at her once again. When out with her parents, her mom references a specific memory between her and Tree, but she, as earlier, doesn't have any idea to what she's referring. These memories are not her own, but the Tree that originated in this universe. So she now begins to understand that she doesn't belong here, and it would never be truly her reality or relationship with her mother. So as they're about to fire the Sissy, unaware of her change in heart, she crashes into an electrical grid, knocking out the power in the area and resetting the day one more time. And though she has to go through the painful process of losing her mother again, at least this time she can say goodbye before she goes. And that night also tends with our alternate Babyface Killer to save Lori. Oh yeah, remember that old killer thing? The big identity reveal though is pretty pointless in the grand scheme of things in the story at this point. The professor guy Gregory taking Lori's place as the killer in this universe. He had the same essential plan as Lori with Tree, trying to use the serial killer tombs at the hospital to cover up murdering her himself. Initially thinking this would be due to the wife finding out about their affair or something, but in a needless extra twisting of things, he and his wife are in on it together. She did know about the affair and had a hand in orchestrating the plot to kill her, not wanting his affair with a student to get out in public. And just as quickly as their partnership is revealed, Gregory turns on her, shooting her dead. Okay, whatever. Tree puts a stop to him, saving Lori, and Ryan along with the others are able to successfully send Tree back to her original universe, right where she left off in the first place, and returning things back to normal it seems. So the reactor was able to correctly function and help get Tree back. But it looks like they won't be basking in their success for too long. As they step out into the quad, a fleet of black SUVs swarm all around them, marked with DARPA, or Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, whatever the heck that's supposed to mean. A suited man, Dr. Parker, stepping out, and having already learned of their recent experiments, orders them to all come along to his facility. There he reveals they are now in possession of the reactor and are interested in testing the time loops, and the only thing they need is a test subject. Tree is quick to make a suggestion. Her old pal Danielle, who proved to be annoying at heart in both universes. Her scene in bed at the very end, waking up and screaming, presumably beginning her own time loop. This seemingly teases a Happy Death Day 3, with her now at the center of the repeated day, and her character being at the front of things would make the concept feel a bit different next time. Writer-director Christopher Landon has said he always envisioned the movies as a trilogy, and this could be the direction that they go. But once again, this raises so many questions of how that would work. They, I guess, have some way of targeting the reactor's effect to a single person who retains their memory with each reset, but no one else presumably would. So it will be difficult to actually track any of the research at all, unless using Danielle in the same way as Tree to store the info. Though this could all be easily rectified in the third entry by expanding more on just how the reactor works. As far as what exactly they would learn from doing this, I'm not sure about that either. But that Dr. Parker guy looks a lot smarter than me, so I just assume he knows what he's doing. Another massive dangling plot thread left in the story is the Doppelganger of Ryan, or Ryan 2. He was there with everyone else when the reactor went off the first time, so he should have been there when Tree comes back. But there's no sight or mention of him at all. Did he also get blasted back into his own universe or something? I feel like his character has to be explored further in a part 3. So if Danielle is the one experiencing the loop, maybe she's not quite as adept to it all as Tree was, causing things to somehow go inadvertently wrong in the multiverse. And since Ryan 2 is stuck in Tuesday the 19th loop, Tree could seek out his help to destroy the reactor as he originally intended, finally realizing the only thing to do is to destroy Sissy once and for all, to finally put a stop to all these loops in order to save the multiverse. I feel this concept would be a properly twisty direction to go in the trilogy finale, really taking advantage of the many crazy and unexpected directions things could go in the story involving parallel universes, instead of more or less rehashing the same thing again. This brings us to the conclusion of this ending explained for Happy Death Day to You. While not as slasher-centric as the original, I didn't mind the new tone and direction the sequel took, and it was definitely an entertaining ride, even if it did come across as a bit half-baked in some regards, with many story elements left underdeveloped. It's still hilarious and a quite ballsy direction to take the story, and I do appreciate that. Hopefully we'll get to see this whole thing come to a grand conclusion in Happy Death Day Tree. They have to call it that. Happy Death Day Tree, and maybe a little H like in the middle, you know what I'm saying? Happy Death Day. Anyway, what did you guys think of Happy Death Day to you? Did the change in tone ruin it for you? What direction would you like to see the next sequel go? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow. Thanks for watching FoundFlix. See you next time.